Welcome back to the engine room. This is an AMC 304 V8. I'm going to be using it in my 1977 Jeep CJ7. We just got this block back from the machine shop. It was bored out, 40 thousandths over, new freeze plugs and cam bearings. We had the heads completely rebuilt. The crankshaft was ground down. We got new pistons on the connecting rods. We're doing a full rebuild. Most of the parts are now here, and it's very tempting, I know, to just start building, but we've got a lot to do and a lot to get right before we just throw this motor together and put it in the Jeep. And that's what today's video is all about. We're gonna be mocking up the engine. Like, we'll throw in the new camshaft, test fit it with the new cam bearings, make sure everything's good, make sure it's not too tight. We've got a ton of parts we need to clean up. We got measurements to take. We have a modification to do to the oil system, and that's just the engine. We still have a transmission we need to put on here, which means a clutch and linkage, stuff like that. And then we have the Jeep itself. That means motor mounts, wire harness. It's a mess. There's a lot to be done. Let's check it out. Let's go ahead and just test fit that cam right away. That way, if it is a little bit tight, I can get it to my machine shop right away. That way they can just shave it down a little bit. Here we got our new comp cams unit. It's a 447 lift, 212 duration on a 110 LSA. I don't know off the top of my head the stock cam specs, but I did look it up at one point, and it's not that much bigger. And that was my intention. I just want a little bit more low end torque, more just like a towing cam, off-road cam, mild build. Now, since we're just test fitting the cam, I'm just gonna use some VR1 oil to lube everything up a little bit. When it's time for the real deal, we'll use assembly lube. Now I'll put some on the cam journals and we'll get her going. Now, if everything is the way it is supposed to be, the cam should just very easily spin in there with hardly any resistance. See, and that last one's a little tight. See? This is why we do this. I can't even get it all the way. So, block and cam need to go back to the machine shop. This is about how it should be when it's in there. It just very easily turns and is a little bit too big to go on home there. Pull this back out. Got that cam issue squared away. I sent a message to my machinist, so we'll get that rolling. Next, we'll stay with the block here, and we'll talk about this oil modification. Pretty common thing to do with AMC motors, although heavily debated on the effectiveness of it, but I like the sound of it. So the idea is to channel high pressure oil from the front of the motor and get it to the back so that the rear bearings and the back half of the camshaft gets as much oil as the front. I'll be using 6AN oil line and these Earl's AN fittings. Now, I did order everything, but I didn't know some of them were on back order. So this is the 6AN to 1/4 inch NPT. So we'll tap a hole here, and then this fitting goes right there. And then you run about, I don't know, a foot of AN line. You put another fitting back here, but I need one with a 90 degree. Obviously, I won't be able to do that today since I'm missing some of the fittings. And I was just thinking about it, since the block's going back to the machine shop anyway, maybe I'll just have him drill and tap those holes a while for me. Figured I'd show you guys that since it is the plan. I tried to square you up with the bore as best as I could. We're gonna check this Felpro head gasket. I got this in a 5-liter AMC kit, and 304 is the 5-liter, but since we're bored over 40 thousandths, I just wanna verify. I predict it'll be just fine, but I'm just trying to center up all these mounting holes, and that looks just about right. It looks close, but you can still see the beveled edge on the cylinder bore all the way around the head gasket. Got my micrometer here. We're going to try and grab a measurement off of this head gasket just to try and double check. A head gasket should be anywhere from 30 to 60 thousandths above your bore size. Standard 304 is a 3.75 bore. We're 40 thousandths over bore, so that's 3.79. I'm going to be measuring from top to bottom here. That's where it looked like it was getting really close when we put it on the block earlier. Let's see what happens. First measurement, 3.851. Do it again. 3.861. Close enough for me, which is, I'm gonna have to math that. Cool. That's almost exactly 60 thousandths above our bore size. So, as suspected, I think we're gonna be good to go to use this head gasket. Quick disclaimer though, this micrometer came from Harbor Freight. It's probably not that accurate. And the 3.79 bore size is what it should be on paper. I didn't actually measure each individual bore to check. These numbers are kind of ballpark, but it's probably pretty close. I'm using this. Done with the block for now. We do have one more thing we need to verify. and that's this harmonic balancer. It's made for 3 different AMC engines, and there's these counterweights based on which motor you have. Being that we have a 304, we need the one that says 91102. If you look here, it looks like the 91103 is what's installed on here, so we do need to switch that around. Just a couple Allen screws holding these on. Oh wow, that was really loose. Cool. According to the diagram with the keyway straight up, it goes down here, which is exactly where that other one was. But I'm gonna add some Loctite to this hardware. I feel like it should have it. That ought to do it. Now that we've verified everything for the engine and such, we can talk about cleaning some of these parts. Now, like I mentioned in a previous video, in order to cut down costs on the build, we're going to be reusing as many of these old parts as possible. And they were really dirty. I took several evenings in the old parts washer here and got them cleaned up. I even took the intake manifold and the oil pan to the car wash and really sprayed them off. Got the pressure washer in here. There was a bunch of coolant caked up. Everything is now clean. Gasket surfaces are ready to go. Timing cover here. Everything is just ready for a gasket and gets slapped on the motor. Fuel pump, same deal. Timing set, cleaned up real nice. The water pump, cleaned up really good, but the outside is still a little bit ugly, but this water pump's not that old. Well, it is pretty old. It just doesn't have a lot of miles on it. What we're going to do from here is we're going to bring the engine out and kind of mock up the build. We're going to bring the parts out in the order that we would assemble them on the engine as if we were building it. Make sure we have everything. We'll get that final list going of the last few parts we need. That way, when it is time to build, we'll have everything. First thing I put in is the camshaft, which we have, but like we found out earlier, that's going to the machine shop. Once the cam is in, we would go ahead and throw in our main bearings. Then we would go ahead and send our crankshaft on home, nestle that into place. And then we would put the other half of our main bearings into our bearing caps. I'm undecided on bearing cap hardware. As you can see, I have the bolts here, which I don't think ARP makes them, but I heard big block Chevy main bearing bolts will work. And to go along with the rearmost bearing cap, rear main seal. Then it would be time for pistons. We got rod bearings right here. And then of course, the pistons themselves. Before the pistons go in, I almost forgot, piston rings. Move around to the front, do our timing set. And then the cam gear, we'll get the fuel pump eccentric and the distributor gear. And the crank gear, we'll get the oil slinger, which we need to order. Then we'll put the front main seal inside the timing cover gasket, bolt the timing cover down, and we'll be able to throw on the harmonic balancer. Then we'll need the oil pump rebuild kit with the gears, along with the spring that goes in the oil filter adapter right there, and then the fuel pump. We could either wait or do it right away. Water pump gasket plus the pump itself. Then we'll throw on them head gaskets, bolt the cylinder heads on, and new ARP hardware for the cylinder heads as well. Once the heads are on, we can go ahead and put the lifters down in there. And then we can measure for push rods, which I don't have. We'll have to do that on the spot and then order them in. After that, I'll turn the motor back around, install the oil pickup tube, oil pan gasket, and oil pan. Then we'd be done underneath. Then we go back around to the top of the motor and then do the valley pan gasket. Then go ahead and put on our intake manifold. We'll need a thermostat housing, oil breather, coolant tube for the heater core. We have a couple sensors we need to buy. The coolant temperature sensor, which goes right there. We need a plug for that port, and then our crankcase ventilation plugs in back here. And then also on the block is our oil pressure sender. Goes right here. We'll get a new one of those as well. After that, we can finish up on our front cover by adding our distributor. Then we would do spark plugs, which we need, and then plug wires. Throw on some valve covers. The cherry on top is our brand new Holley carburetor. And that carburetor stud is bent, so we'll need some new ones of those. Once that's done, putting the rest of the accessory drive on will be easy. All the pulleys, alternator, all the alternator brackets. I want to show you this, the oil dipstick tube. There's daylight shining through it and it's cracked. So we're gonna need a new dipstick tube. As far as parts go, I'd say we have about 99% of it. We have all of our gaskets. When it comes to hardware, I dug up this box that I kept when I was disassembling this motor 2 or 3 years ago. And everything's labeled, got hardware for most everything. I even kept the head bolts. Like I said, new head bolts. Probably gonna try and do new main cap bolts as well. I think I'm just gonna go with what I have here. If I see that we need it along the way, we'll just order it in quick. Let's talk about transmissions. Since we're gonna wanna put the engine and the transmission in at the same time, we need to get the trans ready to go in too. I got 2 of them. These are both Borg Warner T15 transmissions. 3 forward gears. This is the one we're gonna end up using, but I got them both out. I wanna swipe the 4-wheel drive linkage off the old one here. This one is not in good working order. We'll put her in 3rd gear, 2-wheel drive, and have a listen. And not to mention the output shaft is broken off, but the 4-wheel drive linkage is nice and tight on this one. I mean, tighter than this one is, which I'm sure I can replace, but I'm gonna use what I got here. I made an important discovery. I don't even think I need to swap these linkages. All we need to do is tighten up this shaft right here. There's a nut on this side, and it just seems loose in there. See, I can move it around. And on this one, the one I was gonna use, inside this collar here, you can see how much slop is there. So I think if we can tighten this one up, there's no slop up here at the top. So let me try and tighten that down and see if that does the trick. Sure enough, I tightened that thing up and that linkage is nice and tight now. We're in good shape. The top cover's off, but all the gears are in great shape. So we just need a new gasket and fluid, and then we'll get a new throw-out bearing. Now, this is a mechanical clutch on the CJ. No hydraulic assist. You can see the arm right there. Let me move the pedal. It's all mechanical. I'd be willing to bet that that is the original linkage, and they do make a brand new upgraded linkage. We wouldn't have to do that, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and splurge on that. That way everything feels good with the transmission. Let's check out some of these other transmission parts. We got some of the old linkage components, adjustments, and we'll be replacing that. The clutch, it's got a 2003 date on it. It's not quite down to the rivets yet, but a few of them are pretty close, so we're gonna replace the clutch. It's a 10.5-inch clutch. It shouldn't be too hard to find. Luckily, CJs have a pretty big aftermarket, new pressure plate, and then the flywheel will be reused, but if you can see all these little hairline cracks and fractures, this definitely needs to get resurfaced. When we take the engine and cam back to the machine shop, also gonna bring the flywheel along and get that resurfaced. So once we have the engine and transmission squared away, we're gonna need a home for them to rest. In the Jeep here, you can see the motor mounts cracked and dry rotted, so we'll replace those. And then wire harness. Everything is labeled, so I know where it all goes. We're good on that end, but what I'm gonna do is clean all the wiring up and re-lume everything. Kind of like I did on the old C10 there, make it look real nice. Clean it up on the firewall, but we'll do that once the engine's in. That way we know the length of wire we need and stuff like that. Over here is kind of where I store all my CJ parts. We'll do U-joints on the drive shaft eventually. Let's just get the motor running first, get her on the road. Here's all of our dust shields, transmission mount, cross member down there. So all the parts are here. Hopefully the turnaround time at the machine shop isn't too bad for that cam and the flywheel. In the meantime though, I'll get the remainder of those parts ordered on the way here. That way next time we are ready to build. And that should wrap it up for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're excited for the build. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.